Mm. And you reminded me of another good question. What is the social predator's secret playbook?
Hmm. I would say, I mean, most of that really just revolves around lying and deception of some kind, right? Misrepresenting themselves in some way. So there's lying of omission. There's lying by just misrepresenting the truth, just outright denying something. There's lying through coercion. Obviously, the famous gaslighting term. It's trying to convince somebody of something that's not true, or trying to distort someone's perception so they no longer trust their own judgment. Those are all forms. I think the main component of the playbook, if you will, is there are inconsistencies in the social predator, and they're typically inconsistent because they lie so often. They contradict their own lies because they don't remember which lies they told, or they tell them so often that they start to change them again and again. But I think it really comes down to the intentionality of deceiving people. I mean, that's really what it is. And so there are various forms of lying and manipulation and deception, but it really just comes down to that. It's just this dishonesty, this misrepresenting the truth, distorting reality on purpose.
I gotcha. And it reminds me of the saying, they say lies have an expiration date, but the truth is timeless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's something that would get in their way, I would imagine.
Yeah, because they really do have a lot of what I tell people, and even in my book, I say it's not worth your time to try to become a human lie detector. But what you need to do is you need to become very skilled at recognizing inconsistencies. Cluster B personalities have this tendency to contradict themselves often, right? And so they some of them do it because they're arrogant enough to think that you're not going to remember something that was said, or they're going to be able to dupe you out of remembering what was said. And so they'll kind of contradict themselves sometimes in even the same sentence. Like they can start off saying something and contradict themselves by the end of the statement. It's really important to look for inconsistencies in their story, in their history, in their relationships, and how you're experiencing them. And that's like probably one of the biggest red flags is if they're consistently inconsistent, that's a problem, right? Because that's a trait or a characteristic rather than just something that's happening once in a while incidentally.
Right. I mean, and people in that spot, what I see them mess up a lot is they get hell bent on trying to get that other person to validate their perception of reality or validate the way they see things. And then when it comes to those disordered personalities, it just doesn't go anywhere when you do that. You're just going in that circular conversation.
Right. Yeah, I attended a training to learn how to administer and score the hair psychopathy checklist a few years back. And so we had to watch all these interrogation videos of people interviewing psychopaths that were, they were not necessarily, well, they weren't, some of them were under arrest and some of them were just, being called in for questioning. But oftentimes, the question of like, well, how did you feel? And they go, oh, I felt nothing. And then like later on in the same sentence, they go, I mean, I felt devastated. And it's like really just right there, very clear as day. Now they'll get enraged if you call them out.
Sure.
So they're oftentimes it's not advised that that the person interviewing them say, I thought you just said that you felt nothing. And now that's not really how you talk to people like that, because, then they fly off the handle most of the time. But just being able to notice that, and then you can get to the point where you kind of, with these people, if you get enough experience, you start to see that like you can almost just assume they're lying and you don't even have to fact check it. Like they're going to slip up at some point. And so, but I would say, just as a word of advice, trying to call them out and confront that and say, I know you're lying. You just said this, or I can get the recording to back up and I'll show you where you lied. But none of that's worth it. You don't want to get into those fights with this type of person. It just doesn't.
And that's where it comes down to people believing in themselves and their own perception of reality. You notice that, now believe your eyes when you see that, and now act accordingly. But when people get really hell bent on, no, I need them to validate, I need to hold them accountable,
Yeah.
No, the way to hold them accountable is to enforce consequences with your actions, preferably cut them off and get out of there.
Yeah. I tell people you got to learn the language of disorder. You can't, because the language of logic is confronting somebody on something and then them taking accountability for it, admitting to it, and then you repair that rupture and you move on. That's the language of logic. The language of disorder is this person is going to convince you with all the hard evidence you have that that didn't happen. And you can't make sense out of that kind of nonsense. There's no point in trying to persuade or convince them that they need to fess up because they're not interested in solving the problem, right? So but I also 100% empathize and sympathize with this, like this ardent desire and this insatiable urge to try to get somebody to admit that they cheated or they lied or they weren't where they said they were, or that they were trying to manipulate you. It's just not, it's really not worth the energy because they aren't interested in collaborating in that way. So,
Right. I mean, it's understandable for people to want to do that before they understand what narcissism is all about.
oh yeah,
But once they understand, it's like, okay, if
yeah,
you're getting this lingering upset effect, you're dealing with these crazy making conversations, truly understand they are not looking for a solution. They're looking for a reaction.
yeah, absolutely. And you're going to give it to them because you're going to have a big reaction. I tell people covert manipulation evokes overt reactions. So somebody who's going to look you square in the eye and not break eye contact and say, no, I didn't say that. When you have it on tape, you can look at your phone. It's going to infuriate you. And you have to know, like, okay, I need to step away from this right now because they're looking for me to blow up so they can say that I yelled and screamed and threw something. And they're going to document that. And that's overt. So theirs isn't. And they're going to win. They're always going to win and come out on top with those. And I don't, again, like you just said, and I don't blame people. I had to learn the hard way that you try to fight over and over and over again to get somebody to admit to something, and it falls upon deaf ears, blind eyes. They don't care. It's not even a pride thing. I think so much is like sometimes these individuals lie even when it's in their best interest to tell the truth. Like they'd have a less of a consequence if they tell the truth, but they still decide to go down the route of lying or denying. And so right at that point, it's like it's too primitive to deal with, you know?
Right. In those moments too, I think little sayings I think can really help people because in that moment of truth, what are you going to do? What's going to help you to take a step back and respond rather than react and do something that is going to be healthy for you instead of playing their game? Do you have any tips for people that when they're in that make or break moment?
I mean, right there in the moment, I just think that the best thing that you can try to do is minimize any like emotional dysregulation that you're feeling. I think it's really important to step away. If we're not, so we're mainly talking about emotional manipulation here. Say if there's any risk of physical harm, there's nothing you should say. You should just get yourself safe, right? But if we're talking about people who are feeling hell-bent on trying to get someone to fess up or confess to something, and it's dysregulating you because it's so infuriating, I think the best thing to do is just try to feel as indifferent as possible and create space. I wouldn't try to come up with something clever to say or try to even portray yourself as someone who's impervious to it. I think the best thing to do, I mean, there's unavoidable exchanges that are going to take place, especially if there's court proceedings or that kind of stuff that shared assets and you have to have contact. But there's really no point in trying to come up with something to say. I do tell people say something as brief as possible. So stay brief, focus on one problem at a time. Don't get derailed in a conversation into the past or the future. Just stay here, redirect them. This is not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about this. Identify a problem, and then like sometimes offering an option, what works better for you right now, because you're surviving these exchanges. You're not going to win them. You're just surviving them,
Right. You reminded me of an expression that I like. It's BIFF, brief, informative, friendly, and firm,
Yeah.
when you can't go no contact. And I
Mhm.
think that can be helpful, just as remembering not to jade, justify, argue, defend, or explain. That can be helpful sometimes in that moment of truth to not get sucked in to their game.
I do think that's probably, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's one of the most challenging things for people is when they hear the word friendly. How could I be friendly with someone who's doing this to me? Well, it's not for them.
Right.
It's for you. And there needs to be a bit of some, like I would even say add a little bit of lightheartedness, some irreverence, like some humor. Like you can't you can't get stuck on how wounded you are in those exchanges because they're gonna chew you up and spit you out. You do have to have this friendly demeanor, but it's not even necessarily because they earned that. It's because that keeps you safer. It protects you from getting caught in the drama. So it's always better to err on the side of having like a little bit of, if you can manage it, to have a little bit of sense of humor in those exchanges and just remain light because everything else is just going to feel very heavy. It's going to feel very strained, you know?
And I hear what people get caught up on is they think, well, if I'm friendly, I'm rewarding them and
Mhm.
they're getting away with their bad behavior. And I would say what you just said. No, it's not for them.
Right.
All this, just like practicing Grey Rock, it's for you and protecting your peace, not
Yeah.
for them.
You're just meeting them where they're at in their primitive state. And so it's kind of like you kind of in your mind, you kind of have to shrug your shoulders and roll your eyes and be like, "Oh my God, this again." And then with your words, you just kind of, okay. Like I've told people, tell them, sometimes it's helpful to say like, I understand your point. We can talk about this, when we're both calm. But in the meantime, whatever. Have a nice day. Like you just need to you're not trying to solve anything there except surviving that interaction. That's really what you're trying to do is get out of it without getting caught in the drama. Because they try to hook you into the drama. That's all they're trying to do. Um, they're trying to sustain old problems and create new ones in every exchange.
Right. Yeah, the lack of collaboration. That's
Right.
huge.
Yeah. And then you leave with that, you mentioned the lingering upset effect. It's almost like these people have this ability to put something in you. So you can't walk away from it unscathed. It's like you're taking that poison with you and you feel uneasy for a long time. It lingers. And oftentimes that's a countertransference reaction that's a term where it's almost like you feel like something got into you. And with disordered personalities, it lingers longer than someone who just like upsets you. And because there's an intentionality in that. It's like they want you to walk away feeling worse than when you came in.
Right. And something I've noticed in my own life that some of them seem to have a sixth sense for really trying to pick the things that might be a vulnerability of yours and
Mhm.
then ruthlessly attacking it in the most cruel way possible. And it hurts the most when there can be a little bit of truth in what they say, but they take that grain of truth and
Mhm.
then they exaggerate it and they really try to pull it. And for me, those are the toughest ones to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that these individuals can get to a point where they know you better than you know yourself and they know what buttons to push. And the reason why you don't know yourself better is because it's not necessary to self-reflect in that way. But if somebody's studying you and, trying to figure you out so they can, manipulate you and all that stuff, it's like you have to not underestimate their ability to find those wounds, and they're gonna press on them.
Right. The other thing that's helped me with that is just to remember that there can be something to learn and an opportunity, even if some of what they say is nonsense and a lie. The
Mhm.
part that is true, okay, maybe that's something for me to work on and try to improve upon that so they can't use that against me anymore. And
Yeah.
that's I can disempower them that way.
Yes, I think that would be healthy, is to learn how to, because like you just said, you can disempower them, you can disarm them if that's something that you work on and is no longer like um, a button to push, right? It's not like a vulnerable spot anymore. So it's not even that you're validating that they're revealing something about you that's true, so much as it's like, okay, they've given me some information on how to disarm them a little bit more, you know. So you kind of have to play their game, you know.